Carl questioned what exactly happened to Max, looking confused, with Verdona looking surprised and turning to Ben, asking if he hadn't told them, with Ben sighing, saying that he didn't want to have that conversation until everything was over and done with, though his parents were starting to get mad about being left out of the loop. After demanding to know what was going on exactly, Ben then began to tell them about what happened to Max at the hatchery, telling them that there wasn't any traces left, and that was the reason for his bloodied hand, as he'd busted it hitting some of the rubble out of frustration before Gwen had healed him up. Sandra, Ben's mom, then says, "Gwen healed you?" sounding confused as Gwen nods and then used her powdery blue sparkle energy tendril to lift up a cup that was on the table, and explaining that she had been studying magic since she was 10 years old, but never told her parents about it because she didn't want to upset them. Ben then continues on telling them that it was his responsibility to pick up where Max left off fighting the DNA aliens when his mother asked when exactly that became his job, to which he answers back that it became his job 3 years ago when he graduated from the Plumbers Academy, confusing the two even more, so asking how fixing pipes meant fighting aliens. Verdona is the one that speaks up next, as she goes on to tell them that the Plumbers are an intergalactic police force. Carl sits down trying to take all this in, with Ben going on to tell them that there's more, asking if they'd remembered the watch that he'd brought home 6 years ago, to which they said vaguely, with Ben then holding up the Omnitrix. He goes on to tell them that it has to be him because he has the Omnitrix, and once he put it back on, there was no getting it off. Sandra then asked how Ben was supposed to use some watch to save the world, as he activates the dial and changes into chromastone. As he then fires off an energy blast that broke the front door off the hinges, he quickly apologized and said he'd pay to fix it. Carl then asked Ben if this plumber job was how he'd been making money, with the latter then answering, sort of, while timing himself out and changing back to human, going on to add, "I wasn't lying about working for wealthy clients though, that part was true, I just didn't tell you what they'd wanted me to do." Sandra then asked what exactly Ben did do for those wealthy clients of his, to which Verdona speaks up saying that if she's not mistaken, Ben was a bounty hunter, making both of his parents go wide-eyed, hearing that he was doing something so dangerous, with Ben sighing and saying that he was, and one of the best out there. Verdona saying that from what she'd heard, he was one of the most sought out. Carl asked Gwen if she'd known about this, to which she says that she did, but didn't know all the details. So this information was new to her too. Carl tries to ground Ben for keeping all that a secret from them for so long, though Ben tells him he couldn't do that, as not only is he the most feared bounty hunter in the Milky Way, but he's also a plumber whom holds sway over the world governments. Suddenly they heard strange beeping sounds, and Ben went up to his room checking the terminal, finding out some information from one of his contacts, and calls Kevin telling them they got something, and to swing back by at his place, to which the Osmosian says that he's on his way, with Ben thanking the contact for their information and cutting communications with his parents, trying to stop him from going, but Ben gets serious, and that's something that they hadn't seen. The look on his face made the two of them move out of the way almost instantly as he and Gwen ran off outside. After Ben and Gwen got into the car with Kevin, the group speeds off, with Verdona smiling, saying, "Let's see just how these kids handle themselves, shall we?" as she snaps her fingers and creates a bubble around the three of them, and they vanish from sight, with them following everything going on and watching it all go down without being able to stop them, though. They all watch as the three of them, start to fight off the DNA aliens, with Ben taking down the weaker ones without the need of the watch, instead using his plumber's staff and plasma blade, with them fighting their way through, and then Kevin throwing one of the smaller DNA aliens at the hybrid in command, knocking them over. Ben tells them nice shot, with Kevin saying thanks as ship growls at the hybrid as they were getting back up, with the smaller DNA aliens now starting to swarm, though Ben suggests Kevin try the cable, with Kevin smirking and absorbing it, ready to fight them off, with Gwen helping to do so as Ben jumped off the side of the railing and changes into Echo Echo as he began to make copies of himself and began to surround the hybrid before letting out sonics from all sides, making them cry out in pain and drop to their knees, holding their head, trying to cover what passed for their ears. Once down, Ben changed into Brainstorm and began to unleash electrical blasts onto the commander, with ship barking and bouncing up and down before growling and trying to get Ben's attention, moving back and forth to some green stuff in a large containers, though Gwen calls out that she's got it and scoops up a sample from the stuff that was there so they could figure out what it was. While watching, Verdona says to Carl that it seems Ben and his team are quite the interesting lot, and it'd seem that he'd made some good choices in friends, especially that Gwen girl, to which Carl says that she's Frank's daughter, surprising Ben's grandmother mother as she spoke, going, "Is she now? Well, that's rather interesting. I wonder if he's aware of all of this too," while they continued to watch the group, but were unable to help. Once Gwen had a sample tucked away, Ben called out to Ship, telling them that it was time to set things off with a bang as the little blob jumped up and down excitedly, then began to merge with the tanker, messing with their systems, saying their name again, only being much louder and deeper, as they barked and the screens all began to show some strange symbols. "I believe that's our cue to go," Bardona then says, snapping her fingers, as they then teleported to the docks nearby the tanker, as they then watched with Ben, Gwen, Kevin, and Ship all leaving the tanker, getting onto a speedboat which Ship then merged with, and sped on back to shore, getting to safety just as the tanker exploded and began to sink. Once there, Ship unfused from the boat, saying their name a couple of times, but sounding kind of tired, with Ben picking them up, now in his human form, and telling the little alien that they'd done great today, as they then turned and saw Ben's parents and grandmother standing in front of them, with Ben sighing, waiting for a lecture, but to his surprise his mother hugged him, glad he was okay. Verdona tells them that they were watching the battle and that it seems that Ben and his friends were more than capable of handling themselves, to which Carl agrees, telling Ben that they weren't going to stop him from doing what he has to in order to help save the world, as Ship then moved as if they were looking up at Ben's parents. Ben sighs softly and then tells his parents that this is Ship, and begins to explain everything to them about how he'd gotten them, with Sandra calling Ship cute, as the little creature just sort of kept repeating their name, though Ben says that it's really all he could say, and asked if he could take him home instead of having to leave them at the base again. This got the little blob's attention, and Sandra says that she doesn't see why not, with Ship then looking up at Ben as he smiles and says that he gets to come home with him, as the little blob then excitedly began barking repeatedly, saying his name over and over again.